I'm Edwin Warfield. I'm the publisher of Citybiz, and I'm honored today to have a conversation with Ben Peskoe, who's a product manager at Meta, and Rick Hutzell, who is a journalist in the Annapolis, Maryland area. Welcome, Rick. Welcome, Ben.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for having me.
Good afternoon.
So, Ben, you are a product manager at Meta. What does that entail, and what are your responsibilities?
Yeah. So a product manager at Meta is basically a role that works very closely with engineers and designers to actually put the product together. So actually the experience that people are getting. And, I work on Bulletin, which we're going to talk about today. So Bulletin's a publishing platform for creators and journalists to build independent publications. And so for us, the product work that we do is focused on making sure that we can build the best experience for creators and writers that are using Bulletin and for users that are reading the content or interacting with the community.
And Rick, your career includes a period of a stint at the Capital Gazette, and it sounds like you're transitioning to becoming 100% digital. So tell us about your career and not lining up with Meta.
I am a local journalist by training and profession. I spent more than 30 years at Capital Gazette, as it's widely known now. I was there in 2018 during the shooting and led the paper in its efforts to overcome that, continue publishing with the help of an awful lot of people. Earlier middle of last year, a buyout was offered. I decided to take it and move on to see if there were other things I could do, because we're really in a period of experimentation in journalism. It's an interesting concept, and I think what they're doing has a lot of potential. Explain
what the niche that the Bulletin is fitting and the role, and why you thought Rick was a good fit.
For us, I think this goes back, a few years. So Meta and Facebook app in particular have been focused on sort of the journalism ecosystem and community for a long time. That's taken a few flavors for us over the years. Obviously we have a lot of work that we're doing in sort of improving the quality of the news ecosystem on Facebook, but a really important part of it is sort of also fostering the community off of Facebook and making sure that there are thriving, especially local publications out there in the ecosystem who can share their content on Facebook and can sort of help form these communities. And so for us, a few years ago when we were sort of looking at the current state of the landscape, we were realizing that, we needed to sort of take the work in multiple directions. So we would continue sort of supporting some of the traditional publications that we had worked with, like the Gazette as an example. And at the same time, trying to foster new communities and sort of new voices, to sort of bring something new to the ecosystem. And so that was where we came, and sort of developed the plan for Bulletin, trying to think about how do we best support, some of the newer ventures out there, some of the folks who, may not have been able to sort of build a platform on their own, but sort of would want the support of, a tech company to sort of help them do that. And so when we launched Bulletin last year, we made it a really big part of our effort to make sure that local journalists were a huge part of that launch. And that's meant a few different things. So that's meant both folks that are steeped in the sort of tradition of local journalism. So, Rick is a really good example of that. Folks that sort of have the values and can really tell us sort of the needs that need to be met for local journalists to succeed, as well as some newer voices, folks that may not have worked in traditional newsrooms, covering an aspect of a community that maybe wasn't covered before. I think both are important for us, but for someone like Rick, just the depth of experience that he has leading a newsroom, being a journalist, being an editor, really helps us sort of shape the product and figure out how this needs to work, so that we can indeed help local journalists, build those publications, engage with their communities, and build a business around that work that they're doing.
And so, Rick, what led you to the Bulletin platform? You could have gone with Substack. You could have used your own blog. Walk us through the process that got you to the Bulletin platform.
I think I've probably addressed this issue in some of the things I've written, both at the Capitol and maybe not yet on my site, Meanwhile in Annapolis. But in an age when there is such access to technology and really a leveling of communication access, it's easy to see the world as everybody has a platform. Nobody has an editor. Everybody's a publisher. Nobody is an editor. And so I think that the positive thing about where we are right now is that we're in just a period of experimentation that's probably almost unprecedented. Just here in Annapolis, which if you're not familiar, it's a small city by the Chesapeake Bay. It's a half hour outside of Washington. It's a half hour outside of Baltimore. And yet it's really its own city. It's not a suburb of these other communities. And it has a long tradition of that. So even in this small community, we're seeing some experimentation with aggregators and bloggers and some legacy things. The newspaper that I was with is still around. There are nonprofits that have been poking around about starting other newsrooms. And I think this is true all around the country. You're just seeing a great proliferation of ideas about how to use the things that are valuable in legacy media, information, a sense of community, a forum for ideas, things that are really valuable that the breakdown of the model of the traditional print newspaper are losing because they've lost power. They've lost the financial ability to survive in some cases. And so I think the idea of an independent voice having the power of the Facebook Meta platform is very exciting. It's a really interesting experiment.
So what niche is Meta going to play and the Bulletin going to play in local communities? What role outside of the audience and technology solution? Is there anything beyond that?
Yeah, I think, in general, it's probably going to differ from journalist to journalist and community to community. So I think, Rick was talking about Annapolis. Like I've seen you write about this on Meanwhile in Annapolis, Rick. Like Annapolis is well covered by, newspapers and blogs and there are plenty of people writing there. And so I would say in a market like that, probably, journalists that we would have on Bulletin would add a new perspective, add a new voice, summarize the events, add an opinion, gather things for people so they don't have to read multiple sources and sort through it all themselves. Something that basically adds and complements the institutions that are already there. Meanwhile, I think there are communities, both geographies and then communities within some geographies where there aren't necessarily tons of different sources and there aren't necessarily, newspapers and bloggers. And so in those communities, maybe Bulletin would be sort of or a creator, a journalist writing on Bulletin would be the primary voice and sort of the primary way that, that community, here's what's going on in their city or their county or their community. So I think it's going to be different, right? Like, definitely we'll learn as sort of Rick and the other local journalists that are sort of our earlier folks helping us build this platform as they continue to evolve their publications. We'll learn and we'll double down on what works and try to do more of that.
So, Rick, I read one of your bylines today, Roe versus Wade in Maryland, and I thought that was a distinctive and unique piece. But give us some idea of the different topics that you're going to be covering.
Yeah, that's the great thing about this opportunity for me, and that is I sort of set the parameters when Bulletin asked me what I wanted to write about. They asked me to come up with what it was, and I set it as wide as I possibly could. Basically, I can write about anything that I can connect to Annapolis, and Annapolis is just one of those communities that it draws people at the end of their career because they're attracted to the water. It's an ancient city. It's almost 400 years old. That's a lot for this country. There are so many different elements that connect here. I almost write about anything I want. So far I've written about redistricting. We've had the same congressman for 14 years here, and we're going to lose him, because of redistricting. I've written about a local lawyer who's gotten deeply involved in the voting rights protest march. He's been arrested at protests in D.C. and Arizona and Texas. He was involved because he sees a conjunction between voting rights and the criminal justice system. He was down outside the courthouse during the Ahmaud Arbery trial. So really, it's just trying to find a way to connect ideas that I'm interested in and an address. It's actually easier to come up with the ideas than it is to sort of set which ones are the best ones. I have some, planned for the next couple of days. I'm trying to wrap my head around carbon credits because that's something that's relevant to the Chesapeake Bay in Annapolis. So if anybody understands that, please email me because I could use some help. I'm writing about foxes because this time of year in this area, foxes are crazy loud in the middle of the night. It's just something, anybody who lives in an area where there are foxes knows this. Really, the horizon is the limit. It's whatever I can see, I can connect back to this community. It's one of the great things about having this kind of freedom.
I think also, if I could just say something, Rick, like one thing I loved in your intro letter is how you also mentioned you were going to be, inviting feedback from your readers and sort of adjusting your coverage areas based on what they tell you they're interested in. I think that's a really cool aspect of what you're doing and something that maybe, traditional institutions would be less likely to try, being that kind of responsive.
I think, as the former editor of a local paper, there's not a lot of bureaucracy between the readers and the top editor. I would answer my phone and people would always be surprised. Oh, wait, I'm talking to the editor. I thought I'd have to go through 400 people. It's even less than that. I mean, the filter between me and the people who read my thing is they email me or call me. I mean, I've lived here for 30 years. A lot of people know me. I think I got 5 ideas today, and a lot of them are pretty good ones. More than that, I got questions about ideas in other communities and who can I connect people with in those communities who can do what I'm doing. There's a great deal of appetite for accurate, well thought out information on many, many topics. Now, I mean, I know that Bulletin, it's not all news. There are people who are writing about food. There are people writing about music and culture and fashion. And those are all things that are worthwhile. Newspapers used to be this great department store. You could walk in and, on one page you'd have the news and on the back page you'd have the funnies. And in the middle there would be sports and home of the week and teen of the week and stories about senior centers. And just like department stores, those are becoming harder and harder to find. And so the different things that people are interested in, they're spreading out in all of these different channels. And I think that Bulletin is curating, what they're including in their channel is really smart because you get just a range of ideas, and yet there's still a lot of freedom.
So, Ben, let's bring it back to the technology and the platform. So why should someone write for the Bulletin instead of starting their own blog or Substack or any other platform?
Yeah. I mean, I think first I would want to say that I am so happy to see all the innovation going on in this space. As Rick said, we're really in this era of experimentation. And I think a lot of these ideas are great and will a lot of these enterprises will help support local journalism and other types of creators and writers who are trying to build these communities. I do think, the approach that we're taking, one of the things that, having talked to a lot of local journalists and other types of creators over the years, one of the things that is fairly easy to do is, or easy to at least find technology to help you do is actually create the content, right? So it's very hard to write a newsletter. It's not very hard to spin up a blog or spin up a newsletter. There are many different options that you have, depending on sort of how much you want to control it versus, have sort of an easy, all-in-one solution. I think what becomes much harder is figuring out how you're going to build an audience for that enterprise. And a lot of the current solutions today, put all of that work on the creator or on the journalist. And for some people, that's okay. If you have, a huge list of followers on a social media platform, you can sort of get all of them to subscribe. But going into building Bulletin, one of the things we were really trying to focus on is how do we bring this all together and not only provide a platform for creators and journalists to actually write the content, but also help them build an audience and help them build an audience in a way that didn't feel like all the work was being put on the journalist, who was also focused on writing the newsletter. So one of the things that we've really invested in is ways that we can support journalists and creators' growth. So just some small examples is, we have Bulletin integrated with Facebook News. So Facebook News is our destination for authoritative and high quality news on Facebook app. Occasionally when you click into that surface, you'll see articles from Bulletin writers in that space, which helps them discover a new audience. Similarly, if you already have a Facebook account, or if you have an Instagram account, we'll help make sure that followers that you have on those platforms know you have a new publication on Bulletin, and we'll encourage them to subscribe to it. So I think that's kind of one of the places that we've really invested so far and seen a lot of success. I mean, I think all of us have been really, really encouraged and happy to see the growth that a lot of the writers have seen so far in the first 6 or 7 months that we've been operating Bulletin.
And is it a subscription model, or is there a revenue share on advertising?
Yeah, so it's up to the writer, to the creator. So they can choose the business model that they want to use. We'll support this by building technology that makes it easier for folks to do. So someone like Rick, Rick, you should explain your model, but we've built a subscriptions option that is, again, an option for a journalist or a creator to add onto their Bulletin, where you can write some articles that are for free, or decide that some of the articles should go behind a paywall or for premium subscribers only. We've also tried to add on to the paid subscription model some of the features that we've seen work really well on Facebook, and I'm saying Facebook app. So, for example, some of the creators that have paid subscription models also have a Facebook group that is only for their subscribers, for their paid subscribers. And so they can put their subscribers in that group, and then bring another level of sort of engagement and transparency with that group who may have paid to sort of become a deeper member or supporter of that creator, of that journalist. So we'll be experimenting with more on that over time. And I think on the point you said about two more points I want to make. One is specifically on subscriptions. So we're not taking a revenue share right now, and across Meta, so both Bulletin, Facebook, and Instagram, we've committed not to take any revenue from similar subscriptions products until at least 2023. I think Facebook and Instagram also have subscription products that are relatively new and developing, and we want to make sure we get those right as the first priority. And the second thing is sort of longer term. I think we do definitely want to figure out what are other types of business models that creators or journalists could use to support their publication. So subscriptions is the first, but by no means the only business model that we'll invest in.
It's really a hybrid, and it's allowed me to have the freedom to sort of figure it out. Honestly, I'm well known in this community after so many years, and there was a lot of interest in what I was going to do next, but I was not sure, who's going to be willing to pony up a little bit of cash to follow what is essentially a one-man band. I don't have a newsroom full of reporters. I don't have, a staff to cover high school sports. I don't have, photography staff. It's just me and my trusty digital newsroom, and so I really wasn't sure what the appetite would be. As far as the people signing up for the newsletter, it's been pretty robust. With a fair number of those who are signing up for the subscription. It's not expensive, and so what I've been trying to do is some of these first items, putting them in front of essential a paywall. And the technology is very easily, it's a toggle as you go through and you're formatting it. It's very easy to do. And there seems to be a fair amount of interest in people signing up for that. There's been a great deal of good advice from people I work with. Sam Bennett is one of them. And, I mean, they've had plenty of advice on, how to capture and retain readers. With things like, subscription only events or making sure I'm continuing to speak directly to my audience, which is a little different sometimes, from a classical print newspapership. It's a matter of voice and a matter of perspective. So there are all these different tools that are working very well with my particular set of skill sets, but there's a lot of flexibility that allows me to do one thing one day and another the next.
And so switching back to church versus state, what are some of the things that are, some things happening in Annapolis right now that should require some deeper reporting or storytelling?
I'm hesitant, as any journalist should be. I'm hesitant to say I'm working on this story, but I think I can talk a little bit about one. There's an effort to, create what would really be kind of a unique waterfront park here, and it involves a historic Black entertainment complex that has a legacy back to the pre-segregation days. I think that the musical genre was called the Chitlin Circuit, and there was a well-known radio announcer who was the host of all these, in the 60s and the 50s of all these musical acts. That's obviously long gone, and some of the land has been developed. But there's this effort among a bunch of different parties to try and turn the that property into a waterfront park that would capture some of that legacy. And if you've ever been on the Chesapeake, you know that public access to it is just horrendous. If you don't have the money or the wherewithal to buy in a water access community or buy a waterfront property, there's only 2 or 3 places in this county that I'm in that you can get in the water. The county's just spent 10 years and millions of dollars trying to improve that. I think they've added 2 new boat ramps, So, I mean, it's a real thing. So this would be a really interesting project. And, the local newspaper, the Capital, it will cover what happens. What I hope to be able to do is sort of get into the backstory a little bit. The person who owned this land is a fascinating character in Maryland history. He ran the numbers racket in Baltimore for decades before World War II. How I haven't yet figured out how he acquired this land. The music that's involved in it, the DJ who ran it, his house is still around, and apparently his house is filled with all these memorabilia. So there's all these different ideas that by having the opportunity and the depth, I can't believe how long some of the stuff I'm writing is really different. I think in my previous incarnation, an average op-ed, an opinion column would be 650 words, a daily editorial. And I think I wrote 5 or 6 a week. A daily editorial is 400 to 600 words. News stories end up being in there somewhere. A really long one is 1,200 words for a small newspaper. I've been writing things that are 2,500, 3,000 words, and people seem to be reading them. So there's this appetite for more thoughtful exploration of ideas and trends. There's always something new to write about.
So, Ben, can you give us some of the milestones since the start of the Bulletin?
Overall, I think we're very early in this. We launched Bulletin now, I think it's almost exactly 7 months ago. We had only, I think, 12 or so writers, creators at the beginning, and then have now ramped that up to something, I forget the exact number, something like 115, 120 folks writing regularly on the platform, all of which we're working closely with and learning from and taking feedback from. On the user side, on the consumer side, I mentioned we've been really, really happy with the growth we've seen in the number of people signing up for email subscriptions. So the number we shared, which is now out of date, but we saw, by sort of mid-December, we saw, more than half of the newsletters had 1,000 or more subscribers. That's increased significantly, even since December. And so we're continuing to see that accelerate. And I'm really pleased with just the appetite there is. Rick mentioned in his case, people are reading the stuff that he's doing. I think that's been true for a lot of the writers and the creators on Bulletin, where they're able to reach an audience that they didn't necessarily think was possible before.
So, Rick, where do you see, what impact do you see your column having on Annapolis?
As the editor of a small paper, you do have a lot of impact. You really do. We used to. There was a bill before the legislature on public support for a casino project, and the editorial editor and I, he's since passed away. We wrote an editorial and we said, okay, we'll support this if it's a unique proposal, right? So they put the word unique in the legislation. And we laughed, we thought maybe we should charge them a consulting fee. I don't expect that, that people are actually currying favor with the newspaper to try and get its support because of the reach it has. I don't think I'm going to get that. If I get, if I get a couple of thousand subscribers, it's going to be on my wildest dreams right now. Who knows? But I think that the goal is to be in some small way an agenda setter and talk about things that the people who are interested in public discussion of ideas, who are interested in democracy, who are interested in a common set of facts follow. And so the idea is to sort of make the key subscribers people who have influence over the public debate. And if you get that, then I think that you've done what the mission of journalism, no matter the platform, is. You've shown light on an issue that's before the public, and by providing facts and providing information, you make clearer the choices. I don't want to ever be in the position of saying we must do this in this community. That's incredible hubris. But I think that the right thing for any journalist to do, no matter the platform, is to say, these are the issues that are important. This is where we can do better. This is where we have successes. And people who read it, you read it and you decide.
So what's next for the Bulletin? Will you keep expanding or new cities? Tell us about your expansion plans.
Yeah, so that's definitely something we're thinking about. So we want to, as I mentioned earlier, we want to make sure we're very early in our journey on this. And our first priority is making sure that the platform works really well for folks like Rick, that they're able to grow their subscribers, that they're able to use the tools and have the sort of flexibility they want to do their writing and to sort of build the sort of brand of their publication the way that they want to, and to make sure that they have a business model that works and supports what they're doing. But we feel like we're making really good traction on all of those areas. So we're now thinking about how do we, in a very responsible way, how do we expand the number of people that are creating Bulletin publications, and how do we support those new writers and new creators as they onboard? So nothing very specific that we're ready to share right now, but definitely. You can expect some more detail on this in the coming months. I think one of the principles that we'll try to maintain as we do this is we want to make sure that as we grow, we're maintaining sort of this great experience for creators. And so people like Rick, Rick was mentioning working with one of the folks on our team who I agree is also fantastic and has a ton of ideas. And making sure that everyone has that experience, even if it's not a specific person, that there's the resources and there's a community, so that writers feel supported on their journey. So that's one thing that's really important to us.
If I could just jump in there and add one thing to that, is that it's really easy to get this wrong. I mean, there are platforms out there that are spreading misinformation, and Bulletin is not my editor. They're not signing off on what I write. They're not saying I can criticize Facebook if I wanted to. I have. But it's easy just to open the gates wide and let a lot of stuff in that probably should be more carefully thought out. And so I think that kind of that careful growth is admirable.
Will there ever be a commitment to editorial resources outside of just some technology and audience?
I think So I think areas like that are super interesting. I mean, as I mentioned, nothing specific to share right now, but I think we'll definitely look at sort of what are the biggest needs that writers have as we grow this platform, and how can we best provide services that support them, whether that's, we've Meta over the past several years through the Meta Journalism Project has provided a lot of training and different programs for journalists. So extending some of that to Bulletin most likely makes sense. Exactly how that looks, I think we still need to figure out. But yeah, I mean, generally, I love that idea. But.
And so, Rick, my last question to you is, so what are your thoughts on the future of news and journalism? And so the tangential question, will you ever be collaborating with the newly formed Banner in Baltimore?
I think that I think the future of journalism is it's going to be there. The services it provides to our country are frankly, they're part of the fabric of our society, and it's an evolution of the technology, not of the value of what journalists and media provide. They're just going to be providing it a different way. It's going to look different. And I think we're probably going to look back at this period and be able to pinpoint a lot of trends that, will take root and grow in significant ways. Is Bulletin one of them? I don't know. But I think it's sure an interesting idea. As far as the collaboration with other newspapers, or other news entities, there are some Bulletin writers that I'd like to collaborate with. And the folks at the Banner that's forming in Baltimore, I know some of them. They're good journalists, and I wish them well. More journalism is a good thing.
So, Rick, and then do you have any closing thoughts that you'd like to include?
Thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, and Rick, thanks to you for the work you've done on Meanwhile in Annapolis so far. It's been a pleasure to read.
Been fun to write.
Well, we look forward to following your moving forward with the Bulletin and your initiatives. So thank you for your time.
Thanks so much, Edwin.
Bye-bye.